Well, everyone, from Mark at the top of the North Island, we head up to the top of the South Island, where I'm from, the mighty town of Nelson. Please welcome the wonderful Chris Baillie.
Thanks very much. My name's Chris Baillie and I'm extremely honoured to be standing here as a candidate for the ACT Party. I've long had an avid interest in politics, and my political affiliation and beliefs have been shaped by my experiences and what I've learned throughout my life. I'm a teacher, a businessman, and have served in the New Zealand Police. My mum would be very proud. My father, on the other hand, probably not so much. Let me tell you why. You see, I grew up with a very dominant father who was a vocal Labour supporter. He was a marine engineer and an ardent supporter of the unions. I realised at an early age that the only reason for his Labour affiliation was the 1951 waterfront strike. This occurred when he was 12 years old. His attitude to everything else was very much right of centre. The misguided loyalty was obvious when I was a kid, but it wasn't until I was 40 years old and in the police before I was brave enough to tell him who I voted for. It just wasn't worth the drama. One reason I'm standing for ACT is because I saw David Seymour standing alone for free speech. Whether on minority rights, firearms, end of life, Zero Carbon Act, he'd be there, often a lone voice of sanity in a wilderness. And he got things done. In a world without ACT, we'd have a parliament of mush, going along and getting along, as our rights slip quietly away. We have too many MPs happy to go with the flow, rather than stand up to be counted and say what they believe is right. And yet we live in an information age, bombarded with facts, stats and clickbait. The right to think freely and critically matters more today than at any time in our history, and that's why ACT is so important. I'll tell you a story. A few years ago, while teaching, I happened to suggest that I thought charter schools were a good idea. For the uninitiated, I should let you know that the teaching profession isn't exactly a hotbed of conservative thinking. The reaction I got, you might have thought that I was advocating compulsory slaughter of kittens. A teaching colleague looked at me in the eye and told me point blank, "You have no right to be in education." He then got up and, leaving behind half a beer, he left the pub, refused to even have a chat about it. I don't know about you, but isn't this shutting down of discussion and dialogue an increasingly common trait? It's pretty dangerous too. More recently, I received a Facebook post from a friend of some 20 years. It read, "My advice to everyone who's not an ACT supporter is to block all posts from David Seymour, who only criticises Jacinda, who has done a fantastic job and, well, you know the song sheet, I'm sure." Daring to be different, I dared to reply. I didn't even mention the government's missteps on housing, education, regulation and all the rest. He defriended me on the spot. Refused to debate, shut me down. I bet a few of you have experienced similar things, especially on social media. But it's all right, we're grown-ups. I was a police officer for 14 years and I'm actually trained to deal with bullies. But what about the next generation? Will they inherit our tradition of free and rational debate or live in a cauldron of woke conformity? And if we won't stand up for the spirit of free inquiry and free thinking, then who will? As well as being a former policeman, I'm a current secondary school teacher. Teaching is a fantastic career and I'd recommend it to anyone. I started in 1986 and have loved every year I've taught since then. Helping young people fulfil their potential and be creative and encouraging inquisitive minds and thought, it's one of the most rewarding things you can do. I salute everyone who has made teaching their vocation. I'm sure thousands of parents now appreciate teachers a lot more after the COVID-19 lockdown. But we must remember that part of teaching is leading, and when we see teachers supporting students going on strike for climate change, trying to be their buddies, not their educators, and condoning truancy, then it's time to ask, have we gone too far? I didn't want to feed kids propaganda, but I did think it would be a good idea for the students to experience an alternative view, to debate and dialogue the issues for themselves. I started a lunchtime discussion group about climate change and what it means for all of us, because my job as an educator isn't supposed to teach kids what to think, but how to think. As John Stuart Mill wrote back in 1859, even those confident that their opinions are correct will benefit from hearing a novel counter-argument. They will come to understand their own position more clearly. God only knows how John Stuart Mill would have lasted on Twitter, but that's for another time. Students were great. We had some excellent discussions with robust debate, differing attitudes. Students discussed the premise that science is a process of forming hypotheses and testing them, not adhering to a body of arbitrary, compulsory viewpoints. When they put their minds to it, they could understand the complexity and nuance of the science while beginning to question the purpose behind all the alarmism and hysteria. They, like me, couldn't understand why mentioning any opinion not aligned with the popular mantra was so taboo. In short, I believe they began to think for themselves. Young people are dropping out, suffering depression and worse, because they are constantly being told there is no hope. Anxiety and depression are skyrocketing when, as we're told, alcohol and drug use is in decline. Why is this? A climate of fear, as well as the narcissism and nastiness on social media, has a lot to do with it. I can speak from experience. I was a police officer, youth aid officer for a number of years. During this time, I had a lot of dealings with Oranga Tamariki, supporting children who suffered physical, emotional and psychological abuse. I can tell you, it breaks your heart. In my view, we are letting our children down. We need to give them facts, hope, and then the ability to critically evaluate for themselves and the mindset to get things done. In other words, come to think about it, we need to make them a bit more like ACT Party members. I believe there's a better way. This story is not about climate change. It's about being prepared to ask the right questions. Is climate change real? Of course it is. Things are changing. The bigger and far more important challenge is, what are we going to do about it? How can we balance our responsibility to the planet with people's legitimate aspirations to improve their lives? And now, as we emerge blinking into the sunlight after COVID-19, I'm less interested in whether you wear a mask or not than how we can jumpstart our economy of such an assault on our health and our wealth. These are the questions that we in ACT aren't afraid to ask. I'm a teacher because I want to help our kids be prepared to tackle the most important challenges facing humanity. If we're going to change our future, then we need the millennials and Generation Z by our side, because they are our future. I love this country. New Zealanders are independent, respectful, responsible and resourceful. And if New Zealand is going to continue to be the incredible country we are, then we need to encourage young people to reason and come to their own conclusions. Adults have to recognise our role is to curate and encourage discussion and debate, while helping them develop the resilience to persevere through hard times. Those are the kind of values that we in ACT are proud of, and they are the principles that can truly change your future. But New Zealanders should not be under any illusion. The thought police are out in force. One example, Andrew Little's free speech legislation will cripple discussion, nullify debate, stunt opinion, and serve a very real agenda of fear and control. At school, we don't have mufti days anymore. Instead, we have casual dress days. I did a bit of research, and for the life of me, I can't work out how offence can be taken. The new laws being proposed to protect anyone from being offended about anything are concerning. A poster in my classroom says, "Just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right." My students get it. As the neuroscientist Sam Harris put it better than me, that feeling of taking offence, perhaps more than any other property of your mind, can mislead you. And I think he's right. Don't take offence, get involved. Don't shut down debate, instigate it. And don't moan about the present when you can change your future. One name I haven't heard anyone complain about is my hospitality business in Nelson. It's called The Honest Lawyer. Speaking as a businessman, I have to say that in 3 years, this Labor government has shown a complete lack of understanding about how business works. And this is at a time when small business has never been more important to economic recovery. I employ 30 fantastic staff. During the recent lockdown, they were all looked after very well with the wage subsidy. Effectively, they were put on a benefit until we could open our doors again. Not only did our rent rates, power, phone, other fixed costs continue, the Beehive put the minimum wage up. Knowing there was zero income for the business, they put the minimum wage up. I just hope that the more I say it, the better I'll understand it, but it just doesn't make sense. As a government, we need to be making it cheaper to hire people after the crash and not more expensive. New Zealand is going to need to adjust its thinking due to the pandemic and its devastating effect on businesses. We must not fall for the lazy thinking that if people are paid lots, they'll work hard. People should be paid lots if they work hard. To me, that's just common sense. ACT's policy to freeze the minimum wage for 3 years would help both employees and employers to both keep their jobs and plan for the future with more security. It will create more jobs. And it will encourage businesses to invest in the future with more certainty and confidence. Labor says, trust the government. We in ACT say to individuals and entrepreneurs, we trust you. There's so much that we need to do for small businesses. The complexity and technicalities currently required in employment contracts is prohibitive. The personal grievance process is so biased that good, caring business owners have given up defending them. It's easier and more cost-effective to just pay the demand, to keep the business so that other people can be employed. It's time to end the ideological dogma that business owners are somehow the enemy. COVID-19 has shown how we are in this together, and if we are to revitalise and rebuild our economy, it will be businesses like this leading the way. I've heard it said that if business was easy, everyone would be doing it. Anyone would think that there was no one in this current cabinet who has ever even owned a business or had to make payroll. Perish the thought. ACT's alternative budget is a common sense way to get businesses moving and New Zealanders working, written by people who know how business works to give them the jump start they need for growth. When we make it easier for businesses to operate, not tax them to oblivion, we will come back stronger and we will build back better. But it can only happen if New Zealanders vote to change their future. The choice could not be clearer. The Greens want to tax the successful and redistribute their hard-earned wealth. ACT want to enlist every New Zealand business owner saying, we trust you, we believe in you, and we respect the work that you do to keep our economy going. I believe in ACT for many, many reasons, and our business policy shows a clear understanding of the issues currently holding businesses back from really making New Zealand hum. Simplifying GST returns for small, medium businesses, an immediate reduction in GST, and the scrapping of provisional tax are sound economic policies. I'm a special needs teacher as well as an employer. I can tell you that the removal of the trial period directly affected the most vulnerable in our society. Another poor decision from a government that purports to care. It's true that I haven't always voted ACT, but it has become clear to more and more of us that if you want principled, honest, accountable government representing all New Zealanders, then David Seymour and ACT is your only choice. We've sprayed the cash around for long enough, and it's time for the adults to take back control. Any New Zealander who owns or works in a business can change their future. Any New Zealander who values free speech, being allowed to have and able to voice an opinion, can change their future. Any New Zealander who cares about the education, safety and future of their kids can change their future. These New Zealanders, and that pretty much covers them all, need to stand up and be counted. Now, more than ever before, I'm asking New Zealanders to change your future, stand with me and Party Vote ACT in September. Thank you.